Welcome to the demo walkthrough, the very first one of LLemonStack. LLemonStack is what I think is the easiest way to get a crazy powerful local open source AI agent platform up and running in just minutes. And wow, does this have a lot of neat toys under the hood, and all of it is completely open source. You can see on the GitHub page, here's a bunch of the different services. There's actually a few more under the hood and several in development. There is a little bit of technical knowledge to get this up and running currently because we haven't done an installer yet. You need to be comfortable with terminal, and you need to have Dino, Git, and Docker Desktop installed. And because I'm a developer, I've got all of that already ready to go. So I'm just going to grab this git command and we're going to run that. So this is cloning the LLemonStack repo. And as you can see here, we're just Dino install and then Dino run init. So Dino install and Dino run init. So this runs the init script. And there's a lot of really neat things that are happening kind of behind the scenes. First thing it's doing is it's going off and cloning all the different Git repositories that some of the services need in order to run. And then it auto configures everything for you, including generating secure passwords, linking all the services together, and handling network issues. So I'm going to call this demo stack. And if I just hit enter on these, it's just going to auto generate passwords for me. We'll come back later and put in the OpenAI API key, but because we're going to be running local LLMs, we don't need OpenAI at all right now. Okay, so this option for how we want to run Ollama. Now it does support GPT for all and LM Studio, as well as Ollama out of the box. With Ollama, there's a few different configuration scenarios basically. Because I'm on a Mac, there's an issue with GPUs not being shared into Docker containers on a Mac. So I'm going to run Ollama on my local host machine, so on my laptop, and then expose that into the Docker containers for the rest of the stack to be able to use. So I'm going to select the host option. All right, and what it's doing now is it's going to, I think I actually don't need to allow that, but let's see. Yeah, we're doing the host. Okay. So what it's doing behind the scenes now is it's going and starting Supabase. Supabase is the Postgres database provider that also has a lot of other goodies in it. And it's very commonly used within the AI agent development world. But one of the challenges with Supabase is that you only get one database when you're running it locally. And I didn't want all the different services to collide with each other with same table names and other things. So the init script actually goes and creates custom schemas for each of the services and then configures them so each of the services are nicely isolated. Another really important thing about this is, and one of the kind of main requirements of building this was I wanted to be able to spin up different versions of the stack for different projects and have everything completely isolated. So let's say for one client, I want to have kind of a custom stack for them. On the same machine, I can run the init script, give it a different project name, spin that up, and then at the same time, I can even spin up a different version of the stack, all running on the same machine because of the isolation that it does. All right, so let me show you here what that created. All right, so it auto-populated this environment variable file for us. And at the top of it, we have a bunch of different services that we can enable or disable. By default, most of them are enabled. I'll do another video on browser use, but this stack has browser use built in, which is really neat because that allows you to fully automate browsers from a single prompt. So if you want to tell it to, go book a flight, it can actually do that. And again, that's running sort of safely contained inside of a Docker container. And in this demo here, I'm actually running LM Studio locally, so I'm going to uncomment these. We've got Ollama kind of configured to connect from the stack containers to Ollama running on my host, but I actually much prefer using LM Studio or GPT for All as my local LM provider. Just gives me a little bit more logging and kind of control around it. So I'm going to uncomment those. And then we're going to start up the stack. So just run start. All right, so the first time you run this, it's going to have to go and download a lot of different container files and all the images to run the stack. I've already got some of these images kind of cached, so this is relatively quick. First time you run this, it might take 10, 15 minutes. It is building a couple custom images. One of the really neat things we did was with N8N, and N8N is by far and away, I think, the most powerful kind of AI agent automation tool. And it's great that it's mostly open source, or it's fair use. So we can run it locally. And we did some customizations to it. So it's actually installing FFmpeg and some additional telemetry into N8N. So from a development standpoint, now we can see exactly what's happening on N8N with the workflows and how it's, and we've got it communicating to Langfuse, as well as we can set it up to communicate out to, I've got my firewall settings here. It can share logging data with any open telemetry backend, which makes it really nice for during development to see what workflows are running, if any errors happen. That's what it's doing here, is building the open telemetry image. All right, so while that is doing its thing, I'll walk you through a little bit more of these config settings. Most of the time, you don't need to modify this, but if you have a quick look through it, it gives you a sense of sort of what it all auto-configured. And you can see it generated these encryption keys, did it for Supabase. This is all stuff that you'd have to normally either run in a very insecure way, which for localhost is what janky setup here. For localhost is usually not a huge deal, but a lot of people might be in a coffee shop or an office environment. So it's still far better to run your local development as secure as possible. So it configures all that for you. This would normally take probably about an hour worth of time to manually set all this up, and it did it in seconds. All right, now the stack is started, and we can see here in Docker Desktop, it started up all these different services for us and configured them all. And then it outputs all the different service dashboards and API endpoints. The API endpoints are the endpoints to use within the containers, which I'll show in another video. But the service dashboards, that's where the fun stuff is. So if we just click on one of those, all right. So the first time you do this, we're creating it's going to create a new N8N account. And this can be anything. It all stays local, so it's not going to... let's see. So I remember that password. Okay, so there's N8N running. We also have Flowise, which N8N and Flowise play pretty well together. There's different use cases and when you might want to use one or the other. They both achieve similar things, but they have different integrations, and there's different strengths and weaknesses of each one. So that's included by default here. Let's grab the username and password there. Okay, and light LLM. So this is another big kind of advantage, and it's kind of a requirement of, like, at least how I like to do local development. And I like to do local development in in a way that mirrors a production environment as much as possible. Having light LLM, so light LLM is a proxy for LLM requests. So rather than in all the different services, so N8N and Flowise and whatever other services you want to use, rather than having each one of those configured to talk to Anthropic or OpenAI, it's all proxied through light LLM, which you don't have to use the proxy, but it's sort of there by default. Proxy through light LLM, and that gives you then the ability to do cost control around sort of teams and API keys. You can set budgets, and you get the full observation of what the token usage is. And again, I'm using this stack both for local development, but I also have it running on a couple different mini PCs that I'm using for my own personal agents as well as for some client agents. So this does kind of scale well out of the box. Langfuse is being used as the LLMetry backend. So whenever a chat completion is done through light LLM then sends that off to Langfuse, and that allows you to see exactly what's happening just sort of on the AI components within the stack. Qdrant, not totally sure how you say that. That's a vector store. There's also pgvector provided by Supabase that's also built into the stack. MinIO is an S3 compatible replacement that some of the stack is using. So that's for being able to store files. If you're uploading images or PDFs or something in your chat interfaces, then you can use that to actually store them. You can store them locally. You can also push them up to S3. Dozzle is a really cool logging tool for Docker. So we've got that configured out of the box. You can come in here and see all the different logs in one place. This is a lot easier, I think, than coming into Docker Desktop and clicking on each of the services, clicking through that way, because we can click on the entire stack and see all the logs. And then there's this other little hidden kind of feature down here. If you click on the little dot, we've pre-configured a bunch of services into kind of mini stacks. So all the Supabase services are organized for you. Telemetry, you can see there's Langfuse running. Proxies, we've got light LLM. Analytics, I'll come back to in a second. Vector stores, we've got Qdrant. And our data stores. And our local LLM, we've got Open Web UI running here. The analytics, so this is also just sort of part of the overall philosophy of trying to optimize the developer experience. One of the things that Supabase comes sort of pre-configured with is it's not Langfuse, the Logflare logging system. And if you've ever run sort of a lot of different transactions or a lot of different queries or something with Supabase in local development, you've probably run into an issue where Supabase, so again, the Postgres database, it starts to fill up, or you run into other sort of performance issues. So I've actually replaced Logflare with this dummy analytics server, and that went from it's normally like half a gig of memory that Logflare uses, and now this dummy analytics server is using about 5 megs. If we come back and look at the entire stack, this gives you kind of a rough sense of the requirements. So as at a minimum, you really need about 16 gigs of RAM to run this well locally. It's going to use between 5 to 7 gigs typically, depending on what you're doing with it and depending on which services you have running. But with out of the box, most of these services are already enabled, and we're using about 7 gigs. And a good chunk of that, so if we come back into Here, come back into Supabase, we can see a good chunk of that 2.5 gigs is being used by Supabase. Supabase is in there though instead of kind of vanilla Postgres, because there's a lot of really neat stuff that you can do with Supabase. It's essentially a Firebase alternative. It's a great kind of development platform. So I prefer using Supabase locally because then when I go to production, I like using the cloud version of Supabase. All right, then let's take a look at OpenWebUI. So OpenWebUI is, I believe it's provided by the Ollama people. It provides a so it provides a nice local chat interface, and you can connect it to talk to Ollama, which I'll have another video sort of explaining all the details on that. But that's why OpenUI is there. And let's go into LLemonStack. So again, LLemonStack is the LLM proxy. And by default, it configured a bunch of keys for us. It pre-populated it with some of the OpenAI models. So if I had set my OpenAI key, then this is automatically going to kind of work out of the box. There is some additional step that you need to do to add models here in order to get your local models to work. And this will eventually be in the init script. But right now, there's a little hidden utility I'm going to run. Let's see, it's LLM. And you can just do this manually. So you just come into LLM, add models, and you can have it be, cloud providers, so Anthropic or OpenAI, or you can have it be your local LLM provider. And I am using, that's why this didn't pull up. So I am using LM Studio. And again, you've got Ollama, LM Studio, ChatGPT for all. There's a bunch of different options for running local LMs, but I particularly like LM Studio. Any of them that provides OpenAI compatible APIs is going to work with the stack. So now if we come back in, let's see, I think it's going to find our models. Nope. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to run this importer. Let's see, models. Yep, that's fine. I'm not running Ollama, so that's why I gave. Okay, we've got LLM back here. Now, a couple of things I want to point out. If you are using LLM, and it's going to be similar with GPT for all, Ollama kind of pre-configures for you. But if you're using LM Studio, make sure you come into developer. You want to turn on the server here. So make sure it's in running mode. Come into settings, enable cores, and make sure you load. Make sure you load the models that you're going to allow LLM to chat with. So I've got DeepSeek loaded up here. If we come back into LLM, let's go to test keys and we'll select our local model there. Okay. It's ready. Let's try again. Okay, we've got the models loaded into LLM. And one of the things, if you are using LM Studio, here's what you have to do to expose the models to the stack. Make sure you come into the developer setting, go in and make sure the server is turned on there. Come into settings and enable cores. And I'll have a separate video on this and GPT for all and all the other options. Ollama is sort of pre-configured out of the gate, but there's a little bit of extra steps to set up LM Studio. So we've got cores on, we're running, we've got the model loaded. Again, this is where we'd come in and select the models that we're making available. Now we can come into LLM. Let's go into test keys. All right, we're going to select that DeepSeek model. There we go. All right, and then we can see here in LM Studio that the stack, so LLM made this request, and then it actually responded into the stack. So at this point now we've got LLM talking to LM Studio. So we've got a local LLM provider up and running. Now we can come into N8N and let's build a little, there it goes. Okay, let's, so we're gonna do the chat message trigger and we're gonna do our AI agent. That's good, yep. All right, now for our chat model, this is where it gets interesting. So we want to select OpenAI chat model, and then we're going to come in and configure credentials. And this is where this Ollama host is. Okay, we want this to be the light LLM endpoint. So we're going to set the base URL and we're going to grab the, in light LLM, we can come in and generate API keys. So we get a virtual key. Actually, let's go ahead and create one. Team, we'll call this key test key. And we'll select all models, create the key. We're going to copy that. And now we can put in our API key. All right. So N8N now has access to all of the models that Light LLM has access to. Again, the really cool thing about this is we can add models, we can add other local providers like Ollama, or we can connect Light LLM to any of the cloud providers, and we don't have to come back into N8N and change credentials. That's automatically going to be ready to go. And from the list here, we've got our local models that automatically found those and pulled them up. So let's select DeepSeek. For memory, because we've got Postgres already configured, so this is going to be supervisor, and there is an actual helper function or script that imports N8N workflows and kind of pre-configures them. But I'm walking through kind of the full setup so that if you are familiar with N8N, this will make a little more sense, I think. And we're going to grab that's the Supabase. Let's go into our environment settings. Password. I'm going to grab the main password here. This is the main Postgres password. We'll just set it to DB instead of going for the pooler for this quick example. If that doesn't make any sense, don't worry about it. Let's try that. Okay, good. So now we've got our AI agent connected to our local Supabase for chat memory. And let's give this a prompt. Your helpful assistant. Ask the user what types of AI automation they're interested in. All right, now let's test it. Let's get rid of that. I'm actually going to save it. Okay. All right, we can see in LM Studio 2 that it's making this request. And the first request, it's going to take a little bit longer because it has to create the tables inside of memory or inside of the Postgres chat memory. Output. Okay, and we wanted... Yeah, and there's our response. And if we go into Supabase, yeah, let's click on it from here. And we're going to grab this dashboard password. Wait, is that admin? No, Supabase. And if we come to the table editor, we can see inside of public, that's because we gave it the sort of main password. That's where N8N is creating the chat histories, which if we click on the node, we can see sort of N8N chat histories. What's neat about this is I wanted to show the different schemas. So for Flowise, Langfuse, LLM, and N8N, all of the primary tables are safely stashed away in separate schemas so they don't conflict with each other. And this also makes it pretty easy to add additional services to it, as well as custom code. You can create a new schema for your custom nodes, or you can stash it in public, which is going to be the default. And it makes it easy to see everything inside of Postgres. So that is kind of the quick high-level overview. Sorry, I got probably a little bit more technical in parts. There's a lot of other things happening behind the scenes that I'll make other videos for. But the main takeaway from this, I just wanted to show how easy it is to grab the code, initialize a new project, and then get the whole stack up and running. So you're actually developing with local LLMs really just in a matter of minutes. So hope you found this useful, and stay tuned. I'll have a lot more videos coming soon. Cheers.